Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm delighted to have you here with us today. We have a very special guest with us. His name is Dr. David Kruger, and he's going to be speaking to us about the 6 questions that all healers and their patients or clients have, and what makes comprehensive energy psychology training the crown jewel of energy psychology frameworks. A little bit about Dr. Kruger is he is the co-founder and first president of the International Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. He is the co-architect of Comprehensive Energy Psychology Training and Diplomate Program and continues to be senior trainer for that program. He trained as a clinical and organizational developmental psychologist. Dr. Kruger's mission is to make happiness sustainable, leaders elevated, collaboration productive, integrity profitable, and society healthy. He is president of Integrity Culture Systems, executive director of the CIHS, which is the Center for Integral Leadership, a legacy faculty for CEO Space International, and a certified ritual elder for the Mankind Project, an internationally acclaimed activational speaker, trainer, facilitator, consultant, and trusted advisor. He has provided keynotes and training programs in 7 countries on 3 continents on well over 125 topics. He has also authored or been featured in 23 books and has provided multiple hundreds of media interviews, including Forbes 18 times, radio TV interview reports named David, America's Integrity Expert, and he has received a Leadership Award and Cultural Creation Award, plus 8 book awards in the areas of cultural change, politics, leadership, business, health and wellness, self-health, mental health, and psychology. In addition, he mentors mental health professionals in transforming from private practice prisoners into multi-streams of income psychpreneurs. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That's pretty overwhelming for me to listen to.
So, to start off with, I realize that in short, we will review them one at a time. But what have you found are the 6 questions that healers and their patients or clients have?
Yeah, actually, they're in hindsight, they're extremely common sense questions that are rarely put into words very explicitly. So the first question is, how can I tell when my patient, or if I'm the client, I am ready to benefit from treating whatever the issue is going to be that we're going to treat? The second question is, how do we know what the most useful issue is to work on at this time during this session? The third is, how are we going to evaluate progress during the session itself? You know, the final arbiter of progress is what happens out in the real world, but we don't, when we're in the middle of a session, we don't have that information yet. So how are we going to evaluate progress during the session? The fourth question is, how are we going to establish that there is internal permission on the part of the patient to actually succeed at treating the issue that is going to be worked on? The fifth question is, what's the most useful treatment method for treating that layer of that issue at this time with that person? And then after a round of using that treatment method, the sixth question is, how do we know what to do next and next and next as the treatment progresses, and how do we know when we're done?
So how did you come up with these questions?
Well, it's kind of interesting because when I was serving as the first president of the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, one of the things that I did my best to do was to get training in as many of the members of the energy psychology family of methods that I hadn't already been trained in, because my allegiance was to the family, was to the field, not to any one specific method. And being an integrationist by temperament, by wiring, I'm always connecting dots just naturally, connecting what might seem initially to be disconnected ingredients or elements. And what I was noticing, the more methods I was getting trained in, I was noticing that there were common ingredients, sometimes explicitly named, sometimes not explicitly named, but they were still built in to all of these approaches. Pardon me. And so as I started to sit with the question of what were these ingredients, it was these 6 questions that emerged. And when these 6 questions emerged, I had one of those, V8, duh. I could have had a V8 moments, I thought to myself, my gosh, this is unbelievably commonsensical. These questions are incredible common sense. And yet I was never really trained to conduct therapy, facilitate therapy with these 6 questions explicitly in mind, let alone with a framework for actually getting answers to those questions.
Mm. Very interesting. So how do you actually know when a patient is ready to work on any issue?
Well, so there are a number of ways that we can tell. I think all of us who have worked with clients or patients, we've had people come into our office at the beginning of a session who are scattered or frazzled or stressed. They've had a hard time getting to the office our office that day, or whatever it might happen to be, or they may have something that's less situational and more chronic, where they're chronically having difficulty concentrating or being fully present, and when we have people that are not fully present to themselves, when they're not fully in their bodies, when they're not fully attentive, it's very hard to even identify the most useful issue to treat in a given session, let alone to treat it in an efficient way. So that, what I'm looking for just in terms of observation is how present and centered and calm is the person. Now, when we have additional ways to evaluate that beyond observation and self-report, if we have what's generically referred to as subtle idiomotor cueing mechanisms that we can use to get essentially a second opinion from parts of a person that go beyond their conscious self-report, things like muscle testing, for example, energy checking, then we can actually get information about a person's readiness to benefit from treating a particular issue through 2 sources, really 3 sources: our observation of them, their self-report, and then the report from their unconscious mind, or their higher self, or however you want to look at the source of those subtle idiomotor cueing responses.
So when a client isn't ready to work on any particular issue, even be aware of what issue they have to work on, how would you help them become ready?
Well, this was really a fascinating question for me, because prior to being exposed to energy psychology methods, and the first training I received in energy psychology methods was in December of 1995. So it goes back a little way. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, all I had at my disposal was kind of talking to people about, are they really ready to work, or talking to them about their prior experiences in therapy and maybe bad experiences they might have had that kind of predispose them to being closed off, things like that. But it wasn't until I was exposed to energy psychology methods that I was exposed to an entire tool belt of energy rebalancing exercises that can help a person's energy field become unscrambled, become coherent, and can help a person step into a state of really presencing themselves above and beyond what, even in my experience, meditation can produce.
Mm-hmm. So taking this a little bit deeper, why do you establish this readiness before determining what to work on?
Well, first of all, when a client is working on an issue and no matter how hard they try, they never have anything to show for it. It's incredibly disheartening for them. It gives them less and less faith in psychotherapy or in whatever treatment method it is that they're using. The therapist gets more and more frustrated and helpless. It's not a fun experience for
No, it isn't.
anyone. And so, from the point of view of the enjoyability and the effectiveness of the experience, establishing readiness as a starting place saves a lot of unnecessary stress and frustration and annoyance and false or inaccurate judgments that that therapy doesn't work.
It's very insightful. So you see two parts to determining what to work on. What are they?
Right. Well, you know, the more common way of working on issues is the client comes in for a particular session and we check in with them and we find out what's on their mind. And if that's how we proceed from session to session, then what we run the high risk of entering into with our clients is what I refer to as the endless problems parade. Symptom after symptom, session after session, and we're just chasing our tails. It's not strategically efficient to work that way. So what I have found is far more efficient, and what I'm about to describe is built into some of the energy psychology methods in an explicit way, but not all of them, and it's certainly built into comprehensive energy psychology, is instead of the endless problems parade, starting with identifying what the goal is, what the intention is that a person is trying to achieve, that's in their highest healing interest to work on or work toward today. And that's what I refer to as the priority goal, the top priority goal to be working toward in this particular session. And once that priority goal is identified, then identifying the most high leverage, the most useful treatment focus, most useful issue to focus on in service of making best possible progress toward attaining that goal in this particular session today. So there's the priority goal, and then there's the priority treatment focus inside of that goal.
Very good. So what do you do next after you've discovered what to work on in a particular session?
Right. So once we've got that clarity, then what we want to do is we want to get a baseline reading. We want to see where the client is regarding the specific treatment focus that we're going to be working on today. Because unless we have a baseline, if a person's working, for example, on wanting to feel delighted to be in front of an audience when they're doing public speaking, and if that's their goal, and if the priority treatment focus, for example, is them working on freeing themselves from their fear of embarrassment or ridicule because of a specific incident or set of incidents in their past that we're going to work on helping them clear the traumatic residue from, then what we want to do is we want to find out in that example what level of distress they currently feel around that risk or that fear of being ridiculed when they're in front of an audience getting ready to speak. And the reason that that's important is unless we have a baseline, unless we have a starting place measurement for how they're feeling about that issue, we have no way of evaluating whether we're making progress as the treatment unfolds. So we need a starting place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now you've made sure that your patient or client is ready to benefit from treating a specific issue. You've identified the issue to treat, and you've got a baseline measurement of their relationship with that issue. So now you're ready to treat the issue, correct?
Not quite. Interestingly enough, I mean, we could. It's just not efficient. What's more efficient in my experience is when we secure permission to succeed with treating that issue. Because a lot of times, and this is such a human thing, a lot of times there are things we want to change.
Yeah.
But we really don't have the internal permission or the internal motivation to actually allow that change to happen quite yet. And then there are other situations where it's like, ready, aim, fire. I got internal permission. I'm ready to roll. Let's get this baby dealt with. And so that's the issue of permission. So that the next step that we do for the sake of efficiency and also enjoyability of the process is to secure permission to succeed with treating the issue that we've identified as in that person's highest healing interest to address today on behalf of moving toward achieving their priority goal.
So in other words, it's wisest to secure that permission before you start.
It's just more, it's more efficient and it makes the process more fun.
Yes. So now that you've got the green light to go ahead and treat the issue, there's still the question of what the most useful treatment method would be, isn't there?
Absolutely. In my experience, there is no one method, no one treatment method that is optimally matched for all people with all issues, all layers of those issues in all here and now moments. I've never seen anything like that. So I'm a real fan of the more tools on my tool belt, the better. And when we have multiple tools on our tool belt, whether energy psychology tools, non-energy psychology tools, a combination of both, the more tools we have on our tool belt, the more responsibility we have for having ways to right match the tool to the need.
Mm-hmm. So you're definitely not a firm believer in the cookie cutter method.
I'm not. I know people who do pretty good work with a cookie cutter method, but what I think they run into, what I noticed that they run into is what I refer to as the 80 by 80 by 80 rule, which is that a cookie cutter method, if it's a really solid, good one, it will work with approximately 80% of clients or patients, about 80% of the time on about 80% of their issues. And that's not a hard and fast number. It's just kind of a loose frame of reference for the purpose of making a point.
Right. So this brings us to the last of the 6 questions. What do you do after you've actually done a round of treatment?
Right. So we've selected our highest leverage, our most useful treatment method. We've done a round of treatment using that treatment method. And then what we want to do is we want to evaluate progress. We took our baseline reading earlier on, and now we want to see, for example, if we're working with distress levels, if they started at, let's just say for the sake of example, if they started at an 8 level of distress from 0 to 10, where 10 is the worst possible distress, we want to see at the end of that round whether they're still an 8 or whether they're lower than an 8, and if so, how far lower than an 8 are they? Or if, heaven forbid, and it sometimes happens, where they're even more distressed now than they were when they started. But regardless, I mean, there's a remedy no matter what, or a next step no matter what outcome we get. But we need to evaluate distress, or progress rather, in order to determine what to do next in the treatment.
Okay. So there are actually 6 possible outcomes after completing a round of treatment. So the next step after each one is completely different. That's
right. That's right. Because if after a given round of treatment, the person's done, they have, if we're using as an illustration distress levels, and they've gotten down to a 0 distress level, then that means that we're ready to help their internal system develop 100% resonance with their desired state in place of the distress state. Whereas if they've made progress, but they're not clear of the blockage, they're still in distress in that example, but they're making progress, then we want to do another round of the same thing we just did, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, if it's working, keep using it until and unless it stops working. If there's no change, then we want to look at some specific things to see if we can identify why there's no change with this particular person with this issue at this time. There could be an increase in distress if it's distress that we're working with, where regardless of distress, the person feels worse rather than better, or the whole focus in their mind has changed organically or spontaneously to another aspect of the problem, or they could just simply not even be able to touch into the thing that was being worked on, because either because they've disconnected, what we call dissociated from the issue, or because they can't feel it because it's gone and they're just not used to things shifting that quickly. Mm-hmm. So each of those 6 outcomes requires a different next step in order to keep moving forward in a good way throughout the treatment process.
So now that we've covered all 6 questions, and they do seem like common sense, why don't all therapy methods explicitly and methodically actually address all of these 6 questions?
Well, I think the reason that they don't is because most of us therapists are really not terribly well trained in being strategic, in doing strategically oriented psychotherapy. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of therapists and other helping professionals inadvertently get seduced into working with the endless problems parade. But we're not generally taught strategic frameworks for conducting therapy. We may be taught treatment planning, which is good. That's a cool thing, and that's really valuable, and we should be doing that. Yeah. There's a difference between doing strategic treatment planning overall, which is more like a master plan, and having a strategic framework for conducting any given session inside of that treatment plan. And because we don't have those kinds of strategic frameworks, we don't know how to think in these common sense ways until after they're presented to us, and then we go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Of course, that's more efficient.
Mm-hmm. And efficient it is. So other than comprehensive energy psychology, are you aware of any other energy psychology or non-energy psychology training programs that actually address all 6 of these questions in a methodical, explicit way?
Actually not. And that's part of what excites me the most about comprehensive energy psychology. It's not simply that we're adding energy interventions into the psychotherapeutic process, which is an incredibly valuable and useful set of tools to have on our tool belt that help clients get unstuck in ways that other methods that I have on my tool belt don't usually help people get unstuck with. But it's just extraordinary to have a framework like this 6-step framework that enables us to integrate all of the tools on our tool belt, so that even if we're using, for example, energy methods to establish readiness to benefit, or if we're using energy methods to establish permission to succeed with whatever the treatment issue is, treatment focus is going to be, we might end up using for that 5th step, for the priority treatment method, we might end up using a non-energy psychology method that shows up as the most useful method for treating that issue. But if we hadn't had those energy methods to call upon for establishing readiness to benefit and or permission to succeed, then using our favorite therapeutic intervention that might be a non-energy intervention is just not going to go so well.
Yeah. So basically what we're actually talking about here is a superstructure for conducting therapy. So no matter what methods you're trained in or you choose or your patient needs or client needs, this is the superstructure. Is this not what we're talking about?
That's the unique contribution of comprehensive energy psychology over and above the energy interventions, is having that superstructure that enables us to be really effective utilizers of every intervention method that's on our tool belt, not just energy psychology methods, or not just one energy psychology method. And that's unique. There's no other approach inside of or outside of energy of comprehensive energy psychology that utilizes in an explicit, deliberate, strategic, methodical way the journey through these 6 questions.
So I basically just have to reiterate that in your experience, it's this superstructure that sets SEP, or comprehensive energy psychology, apart, even from all the other energy psychology trainings that are out there.
It does set SEP apart from all of the other methods, and it helps the other methods be even more potent and effective. So SEP is not instead of other methods like emotional freedom technique, just for an example, or tapas acupressure technique, or whatever it might happen to be. It's not instead of, it's the superstructure that enables us to be even more potent with whatever methods we use.
Mm-hmm. So how can therapists and other helping professionals learn more about ASAP SEP training program and where they're being held?
Right. Well, on the ASAP website is a section that is, there are actually 2 places in the drop-down menus at the top of the ASAP website, which is energypsych.org. That's ENERGYPSYCH.org, where you can either click on upcoming training programs and you'll see comprehensive energy psychology, or energy psychology. I think that's what it's just simply called, is comprehensive energy psychology, or in the certification or training section. So you can find it easily through the drop-down menus on the ASAP website.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to add?
The only thing that I think I want to add is that if you are a therapist or helping professional who is authentically devoted to being as efficient and effective as possible in the services you provide to your clients, and to provide those services in ways that are as unfrustrating as possible and as enjoyable as possible for your clients, then you owe it to yourself to at least look in detail at the comprehensive energy psychology training programs, because they very likely will help you become much better at achieving those intentions.
Well, thank you very much. I happen to agree with you, very much so.
Well, I know you do, and I'm delighted that you and I are really passionate about getting the word out about this, because I think people don't know what kind of a gem they have under their noses with this kind of approach because of the 6-step superstructure.
I agree. Well, thank you very much again.
My pleasure.